I want you to know that I recorded this episode before the events of September 10th. I'm going to post the episode anyway. I find the parallels to be poignant and the discussion to be more important than ever. The heat of summer in Allentown, Pennsylvania is the kind that clings to your skin and refuses to let go. Nights carry the faint hum of box fans in windows and the distant bark of dogs chained in backyards. It was 1992, and in this Rust Belt city that had once thrived on steel, people were trying to get by. The factories had slowed, jobs had slipped away, but families kept their row homes neat. Flowers spilling from stoops, kids chasing each other until streetlights flickered on. It should have been safe, the kind of town where you didn't think twice about walking home from the bus stop or sitting out on the porch at dusk. But in the shadows of those tiny streets, something sinister was stirring. A predator was hunting. Not a man in his 40s, not a seasoned killer who had spent decades learning how to stalk, but a teenager, just 16 years old. On this episode, we unravel the story of Harvey Miguel Robinson, the youngest serial killer in American history by serial killer standards. A boy who turned the streets of Allentown into his hunting ground, leaving 3 women dead and others scarred forever. His crime shocked not only Pennsylvania, but the nation, because the face staring out from under the word killer was still the face of a teenager. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. It helps a lot. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Harvey Miguel Robinson was born on December 6, 1974. His life began in turbulence, the kind of turbulence that doesn't fade. It imprints. His father, Harvey Sr., was a violent man. Court records later described a house ruled by fists and fear. Harvey's mother, Rosa, bore the brunt of that violence until she finally left, trying to save herself and her children. Divorce didn't bring peace, though. It only carved the family into jagged pieces. Harvey Sr. was eventually convicted of killing his girlfriend, a woman named Carmen, who was strangled in a fit of rage. Harvey's father was sentenced to prison for life. The sins of the father didn't just echo, they blasted through the walls of the Robinson household like a storm. Young Harvey grew up with that legacy, a father behind bars for murder, a mother trying to keep stability while working, and the shadow of brutality cast long across his formative years. If there is one conversation that we need to have now more than ever, and more than ever, it is the conversation of the radicalization and the violent upbringing of young men. We have an entire generation of very angry young men in this country who feel disenfranchised, who feel unseen, who feel unheard. And the only place they have to go for company and community is the internet. And the internet can be a very dangerous place when you are looking for company. Teachers later remembered a boy who was restless, disruptive, quick to anger. Harvey didn't listen, and he didn't care. What he did have was intelligence. Just enough to manipulate, to lie with a straight face. At school, he was the troublemaker. At home, he was a fuse waiting to be lit. By the time he hit adolescence, Harvey was already slipping into the cycle of crime. He was arrested for burglary, assault, even for trying to choke a teacher. 16 years old and already practicing the art of control and of domination. Court-ordered counseling did nothing. Juvenile detention only hardened him. The boy was no longer angry. He was rehearsing. I just described tens of thousands of young men in the world and especially in America. We have a growing catastrophe on our hands, and so far we are doing very little about it. To understand how Harvey operated, you need to picture Allentown in the early 1990s. It's the third largest city in Pennsylvania, an industrial hub turned working class town just an hour north of Philadelphia. Families live in tightly packed neighborhoods where porches face each other in the open streets. The streets carried the grit of steel dust and the ghosts of factories long closed. Crime was there, of course, drug corners, occasional violence, but nothing like what was about to unfold. And this wasn't New York, it wasn't Philadelphia. People in Allentown felt safe enough to walk home alone at night, to leave windows cracked in the summer heat, to trust their neighbors, which is exactly what made the terror so profound when it came. Harvey's first known victim was Joan Burghardt, a 29-year-old nurse's aide. It was August of 1992. Joan was kind, dependable, working long shifts at a local hospital. She lived alone in a modest apartment not far from the Allentown fairgrounds. She had her routines, her small comforts, the simple rhythms of a working-class life. Harvey broke into her home at night. He beat her, he raped her, and he strangled her. The brutality was staggering. Police who arrived on the scene were shaken, not just by the violence itself, but by the sheer savagery of it. Joan's body bore marks of rage that went beyond the act of killing. It seemed personal, and it was a fury unleashed. Neighbors were horrified. A murder like this in Allentown wasn't just rare, it was unimaginable. Women began locking their doors more carefully, glancing over their shoulders on their walks home. But no one could have guessed that the killer was a boy, still in high school. Harvey returned to his ordinary life as if nothing had happened. He walked through the halls of Allen High School, another teenager with baggy jeans and an attitude. Inside, though, he had crossed a line, and once he crossed it, there was no turning back. The next victim was Charlotte Schmoyer, a 15-year-old girl. The cruelty of it all still echoes. Charlotte was bright, bubbly, a sophomore at Deeriff High School. She worked part-time as a newspaper delivery girl, slinging papers in the early mornings to save up a little money. On June 9th, 1993, Charlotte was out on her paper route, pedaling through the quiet neighborhoods when Harvey spotted her. He attacked her, dragged her into a wooded area, and raped her. Then he stabbed her over 30 times, and slit her throat. She was 15. Her bike was found abandoned, the papers scattered like fallen leaves. The entire city reeled. This wasn't just a young woman taken in the night. It was a child, brutally murdered in the middle of her morning paper route. Parents clutched their kids tighter. The sense of safety Allentown once had was shattering like glass. Police begin to see a pattern. The violence, the overkill, the sexual assault paired with strangulation or stabbing. Whoever was responsible wasn't killing out of necessity, he was killing out of compulsion. And yet still, no one was thinking teenager. Serial killers were supposed to be in their 30s, loners with glasses, not 17-year-old kids who still had acne. Harvey wasn't done. That same summer, in July of 1993, he broke into the home of Joni Homan, a 47-year-old grandmother. Joni was well-liked in her neighborhood, a woman who took pride in keeping her home tidy and her yard cheerful. She lived alone in a modest row house. Harvey climbed in through a window. He raped her and then strangled her with his bare hands. Like with the others, he left her body behind as a message: domination, control, rage. The police department was in a panic. They had 3 murders, 2 women and a young girl, murdered, each more brutally than the last, and the killer wasn't slipping up. Forensic evidence was sparse, DNA testing was still in its infancy, and the attacks seemed random. A nurse's aide, a paper girl, a grandmother. There was no common thread except violence. And behind it all, Harvey was getting better at hunting. Not every woman died. Some survived, and their voices would become the key to catching Harvey. In August 1993, Harvey attacked a 37-year-old woman named Denise Sam Calley, breaking into her home. He raped her and beat her, but she survived. Denise's testimony later gave police crucial descriptions. She remembered his build, his eyes, the way he moved. Another survivor, a 15-year-old girl, also described being assaulted by a young attacker who seemed barely older than she was. She lived as well, and in surviving, she unknowingly began the unraveling of Harvey's reign. By late 1993, the Allentown police knew they had a serial predator on their hands. They just didn't know he was barely 18.
Watch that cut through. Yeah, I'm running over there now.
The city was holding its breath. Women were afraid to walk alone. Parents forbade their daughters from delivering papers, from babysitting after dark, from taking shortcuts through alleys. Police patrolled harder. Detectives chased leads. But the predator was still out there, and he was getting bold. By the fall of 1993, Allentown was a city under siege. 3 women dead, others assaulted, survivors describing a young attacker with cold eyes and a brutal streak. Police had worked hundreds of leads, but the killer stayed a ghost. It was like chasing smoke. But then came the break. Detectives realized the predator had a pattern. He wasn't just stalking strangers on the street. He was breaking into homes of women he had noticed in daily life. He liked to watch them. He liked to plan. One survivor, Denise Sam Calley, told police her attacker had broken in through a window, raping her in her own home. The other survivor, a teenaged girl, described how the attacker seemed almost as young as she was. And these stories were consistent. So the police devised a sting. They set up surveillance on Denise's house, betting that the attacker might return to finish what he'd started. It was risky, baiting a killer back to his victim, but it was their best shot. On a hot August night, officers hid in the shadows near Denise's home, and they waited. Hours passed, silence stretching thin, then movement. A figure slipped across the yard, creeping toward the window. It wasn't a man in his 30s. It wasn't some grizzled drifter. It was a teenager. The figure broke in. Officers rushed forward. Shots rang out. A chase tore through the neighborhood. Yards, fences, alleys lit up by the flashing red and blue of squad cars. The predator was fast, wiry, desperate. He exchanged gunfire with police, bullets splitting the night. Finally, he was cornered. The boy the police caught was Harvey Miguel Robinson, age 18, and the city gasped. At first, people could hardly believe it. A teenager? How could someone so young commit such horrific crimes? Serial killers, we're told, take years to evolve into predators. They start with smaller acts, and then they escalate. They mature into the monsters over decades. But Harvey had compressed it all into adolescence. Police quickly tied him to the murder of Joan Burghart, Charlotte Schmoyer, and Joan Homan, as well as to the assaults on Denise Sam Calley and the unnamed teenage survivor. Harvey's DNA matched, his fingerprints matched, and his rage matched. The trial of Harvey Miguel Robinson was a spectacle. The community wanted answers. Families of the victims wanted justice. Prosecutors painted a picture of a boy who wasn't just troubled, but irredeemably violent. The evidence was overwhelming. Harvey Robinson had left behind DNA at multiple crime scenes. Survivors testified about the brutality of the assaults. Police detailed the sting, the chase, and the shootout. Piece by piece, the puzzle fit together. The jury listened as prosecutors described how Joan Burghart had been raped and strangled, how Charlotte Schmoyer had been stabbed more than 30 times, and how Joan Homan had been beaten and strangled in her own home. The savagery was undeniable.
Essentially, we look at what the possible penalties were on the day the crime was committed. And in Pennsylvania, there were 3 possible penalties. There was a death sentence, there was mandatory life without parole, and there was a 3rd-degree sentence. The United States Supreme Court has ruled 2 of those 3 options unconstitutional, My position is that the only available legal, constitutionally valid sentence is a third-degree sentence.
And if the judge agrees with you, will Mr. Robinson be the first person to receive a third degree?
If the judge agrees with me, Mr. Robinson will be the first person that I'm aware of to get a sentence like that over the objection of the Commonwealth.
In 1994, Harvey Robinson was convicted of murder, rape, and assault. He was sentenced to death for the murders of Charlotte and Joan Homan. Later, he received an additional life sentence for the murder of Joan Burghart. At age 19, Harvey was one of the youngest people ever sent to death row in the United States. The psychology of Harvey Robinson fascinated criminologists, and it fascinates me. Teenage serial killers are very rare. The FBI has studied hundreds of serial offenders, but the vast majority are adults well into their 20s, 30s, even 40s, before their killing sprees began. Robinson, at 17, was an outlier. Experts described him as a textbook psychopath, a total lack of empathy, impulsivity, need for dominance, thrill-seeking. Some pointed to his father, violent, abusive, a convicted murderer, as a possible template. Others noted Harvey's early brushes with the law, his escalating violence as a juvenile, and his desire for control. As I'm sure you're aware, the word empathy has been in the news a lot lately, and I find the entire conversation outrageous. Empathy is a human emotion. It is not something that's made up. And for decades in the true crime community, we have been aware that people who lack empathy are dangerous. People who lack empathy are most often psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists. And as someone who has been involved in the true crime world for longer than some of you have been alive, I can tell you that this conversation about empathy, as though it is some sort of mystical or made-up concept, is mind-boggling to me. Empathy is a real thing, and when someone doesn't have it, run. As psychologists studied Harvey, there was something even more chilling to them. Experts noted that Harvey didn't kill for money, revenge, or even convenience. He killed for pleasure. He admitted that strangling women made him feel powerful. The stabbing of Charlotte Schmoyer, in particular, showed a level of frenzy and sadism beyond necessity. I won't go into a lot of details here, but they're very graphic. And Harvey enjoyed it. That enjoyment at such a young age makes him exceptionally dangerous. Allentown, in the wake of Harvey's conviction, was a city trying to heal. Parents allowed their kids to deliver papers again, but the innocence was gone. Women locked their windows, no matter the heat. The names of the victims, Joan Burghart, Charlotte Schmoyer, Joan Homan, were spoken with reverence, reminders of how quickly safety can shatter. For the families, there was no real closure. Charlotte's classmates at Deer of High School mourned a life stolen at 15. A friend who should have gone to prom and college, not to the morgue. Joan Burghart's co-workers at the hospital spoke of her kindness and dedication. Joan Homan's family grieved a grandmother who should have been growing old in peace. The randomness of the victims, young, old, child, grandmother, made the crimes feel even more terrifying. Anyone could have been next. And this is one of those stories that we come across when we talk about young killers. We have to ask the question, what would this person have gone on to do? 17 years old. I mean, I know I grew up in a very different time. I was thinking about boys and football games and, trying to get away with not doing homework. I was not having thoughts about killing people or any kind of violence at all. I don't remember having any sort of a violent thought until I was much older and was in a bad relationship, being really angry and wanting to punch somebody. All we have is our own perspective. And so I'm just trying to put myself in Harvey's shoes as a 17-year-old. And I just don't know what happens to someone at this young age that makes them have violent thoughts. towards other people. Now, I can understand if he was being abused at home. He had already experienced violence that I never experienced. So I get that. I get that his take on violence and his view of violence is very different from my own. But I don't know how that twists and turns into wanting to perpetrate violence on strangers. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Harvey's mother, Rosa, sat quietly in the courtroom. She had tried to raise her son after divorcing his abusive father. She had watched him spiral, unable to stop it. When Harvey was sentenced, reporters noted Harvey's mother's silent tears. She had already lost her husband to prison. Now her son would live and die there too. It was as if violence had swallowed the Robinson family whole. And this is a conversation that so many people do not want to talk about. Recent events are very heavy on my mind. And I was so incredibly... You guys know I live in Utah, and our governor made some remarks that I found very troubling. He told on himself in those remarks. He said, I prayed for 33 hours hoping that this would be someone. I'm not going to bring up the event because I don't do politics here. But, murder is never political, even when it is. Murder is just murder. It's violence. And it's always wrong. But he said, I prayed for 33 hours that it wouldn't be one of our own. Well, what he meant by that was that the actor would not be white, would not be Mormon, would not be from Utah. Now, he told on himself because what he was really saying was, I was really hoping that it would be somebody else on the other side of the fence that I could blame. And this is the conversation that so many people are not ready to have. The call is very often coming from inside the house. I consider myself a progressive person. I don't really associate with either political party. And I will tell you, there are some nut jobs on the left. Had this been a left-leaning person, I would be the first to denounce that, admit it, accept that, and face it. People are not willing to evaluate anything that confronts their tribalism. We need to have this discussion because I've been doing this for 5.5 years, 50 to 60 hours a week, and I am telling you, there is one group in our population that commits the majority of violence. And that is taking into account the fact that they are the biggest percentage of the population. Even though they're the biggest percentage of the population, they still commit too much violence for that percentage. My husband fits into that percentage of the population. My son fits into that percentage of the population. My brother-in-laws, my nephews, my father fits into that percentage of the population. So why, when I point out a fact, do so many people get angry at that fact? I don't get it. If a fact is a fact and there are numbers and documentation behind it, how do you get angry at that? It's like saying you're angry that the sky is blue. Instead, face it and deal with it and talk about it and try to find solutions. And here again, we have a family steeped in violence. The father was violent. His father was probably violent. His father was probably violent. And we see the outcome as tragedy and murder committed against people that have nothing to do with what happened to that family. We are the victims of this problem. Why aren't we more interested in doing something about it? Why aren't we more interested in helping ourselves? It is very disturbing to me. We would rather choose our tribalism than our own safety. I'm very, very deep in thought lately. I'm scared. I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. I hope I'm wrong on that. But we have a serious problem on our hands, and we have had for decades. We have got to do better with young men. We have got to do better in letting them be heard, in letting them cry, in letting them express their feelings and their opinions and their anger and their sadness without turning them into, I'm not going to say the word. Men who show emotion are the strongest men. Men who aren't afraid to cry. I love those men. Oh, it's been an upsetting week. Just so much hatred and division and little kids dying in school, Sometimes I don't realize I'm as upset as I am until I sit down with you guys. I just don't really feel like hiding it today. Sorry. All right. Now that I'm sufficiently blind with makeup running in my eyes and my contact lenses fogged over, As the years passed, Harvey's name faded from national headlines, but never from Allentown's memory. He remained on Pennsylvania's death row, appealing his sentence, filing motions. In 2006, the state Supreme Court upheld his death sentences. In 2014, Harvey attempted another appeal, arguing ineffective counsel, but it was denied. He remains on death row to this day. In his late 40s, still one of the youngest men ever placed there. He spends his days in isolation at SCI Rockview, a maximum security prison. The boy who once ran Allentown's alleys with a knife and a twisted hunger now lives in a concrete box. His only audience, guards and other condemned men. The legacy of Harvey Miguel Robinson is a story of contradictions. A boy who should have been playing basketball or going to dances, instead prowling neighborhoods with murder on his mind. A teenager whose classmates described him as a troublemaker, never imagining he was capable of the unimaginable. A son whose father was a killer, who grew up to mirror the same violence, and it leaves us with haunting questions. Was Harvey born this way? Or shaped by the violence of his home? Did genetics or environment create a predator before he was even 18? And what does it mean for the rest of us, knowing that sometimes evil doesn't wait until adulthood? It grows teeth in adolescence. Allentown never forgot. For years, people whispered about Harvey in barbershops and corner stores. Parents used his name as a warning. Be careful, don't trust strangers, don't walk alone. The city eventually moved forward, but the wounds lingered. 3 women are dead. Well, 2 women and a child. 2 others live with the scars of his assaults. And a community was robbed of its sense of safety. Harvey Miguel Robinson sits on death row, his name rarely spoken outside of true crime circles now. But in the silence of a prison cell, the youngest serial killer in American history remains a chilling reminder. Monsters don't always come with gray hair and scars. Sometimes they wear the face of a boy not yet old enough to buy a beer. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I want you to know that I'm thinking of you during these dark days. We don't have to agree on everything. We do have to agree on certain things. Violence is never the answer. Murder is never okay. Spewing hatred is never the answer, and spewing hatred is never okay. Every person on this earth was born with equal rights. No one is superior to another human being. We are all totally, completely, banally equal in the most fundamental of ways. And until we realize that as a collective, we will never have peace. We're going to be talking a little bit more about it on the podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify. I post every Monday and Wednesday. And don't forget about our fundraiser. There's a playlist on my channel entitled Fundraisers. You can watch this short video to find out how you can donate a few bucks to help us help police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that's never been tested because there's no money. We're trying to help solve some cold crimes. Take a deep breath. Don't spread hatred online. It's okay to get pissed off if somebody's rude to you. Believe me, I do. But let's use the block button instead of sharp tongues. Blocking people can really save your sanity. It does mine. Thanks for being part of this amazing community. Y'all will never know how much it means to me. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee, the Crybaby. Bye.